A very good evening, everybody. So we are back again with our next session, and today's topic is GSTR1 exceptions, where we'll be learning how to identify the incorrect data which will impact our GSTR1 filing. And the other topic what we have for the day is the additional properties, which will include voucher property, ledger property, and item property. So starting with the first option, which says GSTR1 exceptions. So let me share my screen quickly. And I'll quickly show the navigation. We are already logged into RealBooks. We just need to go to transactions, compliance, and GSTR1 exception. Now, why are we focusing or concentrating on GSTR1 exception report? Ideally, if all the entries are updated correctly in the module, there will be no need to view this particular exception report. Now, what happens? There are certain kind of checkings which needs to be updated in the transaction screens, and certain kind of allowance is there that the system will alert you that whether you are doing the entry correctly or not, or XYZ reason. If you are forcefully asking the system to submit that transaction, the system will allow you, and those kind of entries will peep in when you will go for the GSTR1 filing. Now, few of them are just like, for example, you are updating the transaction is related to the interstate transaction, but forcefully you want the entry to post as intrastate transaction for whatsoever be the reason at that very moment. So for identifying those kind of transactions, that whether what's the exact mismatch, I mean, why the entries have been updated, or to know the exceptions. Now, it's not possible for any user to dig into the entire daybook or all the transactions and through each and every transaction just to check which entry was wrongly done, which was correctly done. So just to help the person in the reconciliation purpose while filing, we have introduced the page of GSTR1 exception report, where we have certain labels coming in. We'll be just going through one by one. So the first option where here comes in as GST breakup exception. Now, what is GST breakup exception? Let's run the data for a certain date range. So we'll search it. I'm getting one data, and now the question comes in that why is this coming in this exception report? What's the difference between the GST amount exception? So let us just dig into the transaction, that what kind of transaction has been done. Okay, it's all normal. And you have updated the date, you have updated the GST amounts and all, everything over here. So why the GST exception? So now the moment I click over that particular amount of GST, automatically a pop-up peeps in where the data is left blank. Now, at the time of transaction, due to the markings of my voucher type configuration, where we are not tracking the GST ledger wise, if you have disabled it, and after that, if you have enabled it, these kind of data where the GST table is blank. Now, these data, we call it GST table. These GST table, if the data is blank, then there is a possibility that few data will not reflect in your GSTR1 combined Excel for return, due to which there can be a mismatch in reconciliation. So when you come up over here, you need to correct the data. Okay, now if I want to correct it, I will just put the rate, save the GST breakup. If I click on submit, okay, this is alerting me that this looks like an intrastate transaction. Kindly check the GST ledgers. Now it's alerting that by rule, it should be CGST, SGST as per the party state and the company state. But forcefully, I just want the system to bypass this, although it's warning me. So I'll just click on cancel. My entry gets saved. And if I search the data once again, the data is gone. That means the transaction has been corrected. So this list will only show you those data where the GST table is blank. Although you have updated the GST ledger correctly, the amount is updated correctly, but the small pop-up which is reflecting in my transaction screen, if it is blank, then there are chances then those data will have a mismatch in my GSTR1 report. So this will help you in the GST amount exception part. So next coming up in is GST party missing. Let's see what kind of transactions do we get over here. Okay, so I'm finding 2 entries coming up over here. Now let's dig into detail. I will open one of the transactions. So it seems to be a sale transaction. So I have a party ledger. Now 2 kinds of party ledger is coming in this screen. That's the party ledger and the GST party. If any of the ledger which is being used in these 2 fields are not marked as party, it will show you in this exception report. So just to check this, we can also dig over here and check, okay, the sundry debtors, it is marked whether the bill has been activated. No, the bill is not activated. This is the primary part. The bill needs to be activated over here. As well as, let's dig into the ledger master. I will just copy the ledger and I'll quickly go to masters, accounts, ledger, and edit. So over here, I'll just search this. I will open this. My ledger category is regular. Although I am using this party as a party, but my system doesn't know that this is a party or not. Although I have used the ledger group as sundry debtors, the party master or the party tab is completely missing in my ledger master. So what I usually need to do is I need to make it regular to party. I will click on save. At least one address should be marked as registered. Okay, it's registered. Please provide state. I will put the state as, for example, Rajasthan. I will hit save and then I'll come back to my entries. Although both the transaction belongs to the same party, so logically both of them should get removed. Okay, now you are getting this part also as unregistered. Previously, when I opened the transactions, you were not finding whether the party was registered or unregistered. So it clearly denotes that the party has not been marked as party. So now if I click on search, the data is gone. That means if the masters are created correctly and you're updating the entries accordingly, these exceptions will never come up into the scenario and it will not be a barrier at the time of GSTR1 reconciliation part. So next coming up is GST output as debit. Now what's it all about? Let's search this. Okay, I am having 2 kind of entries coming up over here. Let's dig into it. Now I was supposed to update a debit note. But in my debit note, usually I am supposed to debit the party. How can I credit the party? I am debiting GST output over here. So if my output ledger is being debited, in my debit note, automatically I am making a wrong transaction. So this conceptually, the entry is wrong, although my system is aligned because it's checking the debit and credit part, it is checking the ledgers correctly. If it is updated correctly, my system will not block you. But if you're forcefully putting the entries or creating such kind of entries, it will give you a wrong impression in your GSTR1 report. Just to identify those transactions, you will be finding these entries coming up under GST output as debit. So this will be an easy try just to understand whether the entry has been correctly updated or not. In case if it is coming over here, you just need to dig into the entry and correct the data and the transaction is gone from the list. Okay, just one more thing. Although there will be multiple companies where you will be having multiple business plays occurring. So if you want to search the data from an all perspective, you can do it from there. If you want to just view the data only for one specific business place, you can filter the data accordingly. So for example, in my case, I'm using the business place of Maharashtra. The entries have been updated in the Maharashtra business place. I'll click on Kolkata. Okay, no entries there. But if I go to Maharashtra, I will be finding 2 entries coming up over here. So these filters are also available for your help just to identify where you want the data to be digged in. Now comes up GST input and output in one voucher. So recently we have updated a validation check in transaction screen. Although even if you want to create the entry with GST input and output all together, you will be blocked. So currently you won't find these kind of transactions people in, although I'll show you why. I'll go to transaction, accounts, and vouchers. Say, suppose I am going for my invoice. I am searching the ledger. I am putting it over here as 37478. Click on create income. So now I'm putting it as 9,000. Now what will I do? I will completely do it as, I'll not select IGST. So usually the data error, what usually people do is they simply select the IGST output ledger as 14%, select the rate, save. Now, instead of creating the selecting the ledger of SGST output, I will by mistake select SGST input. Let's see what does my system do. I will create over here as 14, save, and I will hit submit. You are not allowed to select both input tax ledger and output tax ledger. So this is clearly highlighting over here that you are doing a mistake. You need to go through and review your transaction, that where the mistake is. So now if you see, you are selecting CGST output and SGST output. In case if both are allowed, then this exception would have helped you. But since the validation is already available now, and it's available both in our accounting transaction and inventory transaction, so automatically this report becomes null and void for you. So I will next go to mixing HSN code and GST details directly. And I will find so many entries coming up over here. So what are these entries all about? Let's dig into one of them. For example, this time I'll go for the sales transaction. So as the GST exception report label denotes, it's missing HSN code in GST details. Now over here, I have selected an item which does not has its HSN. If I quickly shows you, if you are doing entries on a day-to-day basis, you will get to know that the moment I select a certain item, automatically the HSN reflects just below, just the way it's reflecting over here, it reflects over here as well. So since it is a service item, the HSN code is not updated. Let's just have a cross check over here. We'll go to masters, inventory, items, and edit. So, okay, so the HSN code is missing over here. You can see from the listing itself. So the moment you update the HSN code as per the rules, whatever items HSN code correctly is, you will be no more finding the entries over here. So these transactions will help you out for the HSN reconciliation part, whether the HSN was updated correctly for each and every item or not, or each and every income expense ledgers or not. So these exceptions will help you out in identifying those parts. Now comes the missing business place. Now what is it all about? What is missing business place? The missing business place is nothing but when we are doing any kind of transactions, like for example, accounts, vouchers, we always find certain business place keeping up over here. Now, these business place have been set up from our settings configuration screen, but at the time of segment creation or the company creation, probably the business place was not there. So the configuration was not done for that particular segment at that very moment. So if the configuration is not available or the business place is not assigned to a specific segment, no entry will get saved business place wise. So in case if you are reconciling your data or updating or making a GSTR1 reconciliation report or the combined Excel for return, you will be not finding these entries wherever the GST has been updated or the exception entries which has been created, because those entries are not carrying business place itself. So those kind of entries or those kind of exception reports will be reflecting in this list. So the moment you drill down over here, you will not find the business place tab coming up above your date part. So since the entries when it was booked, the business place was not assigned to the segment and the entry was done, it was saved successfully, and that is the only reason the business place did not get saved in these entries, and your GSTR1 report will never show these kind of transactions because these entries are not holding any kind of business place. So these exception will help you out to identify the missing business place. Now comes the correction part. We have an option in our admin panel, like all the business place which needs to be updated. You will get all these exceptions over your admin panel as well. And from there, you can rectify these kind of entries. Coming up to the other part, which is GST other than income. If I search the data, I may not be finding any data over here. I will be finding the data from 1st September 2022. So as the name denotes, it's GST other than income. Now you are not using the income ledger in your transactions and you are updating the GST output ledgers over there. Those kind of entries will reflect in these reports. So as you can see, I have all purchase transactions coming up over here, but we usually update the entries of GST output in our sale. We don't update GST output in purchases. So why these entries are reflected in our screen? So let's come to the edit part. Now, if you go and see, okay, this is the purchase ledger, which has been updated, and the tax, okay, the entries have been updated incorrectly. It should have been IGST input at the rate 28%, but by mistake, someone has updated it as IGST output. And so these kind of transactions are reflecting in this exception as well. So this will help you out to identify where the GST output ledgers are used, where the entries is not having any kind of income ledger marking in the ledgers. Now, expected interest rate. So in the beginning of the session, I highlighted that few entries are being updated in our system where we forcefully save the transactions. We had an alert at the time of entry that it seems to be an interstate, but you're trying to save it an intrastate. And that's the reason the entry will not block you from saving, but it will give you an alert and it will allow you for the time. But at the time of reconciliation or filing, if you find some such kind of mismatches, so these are the reasons where the mismatches comes in. So this over here, my party state has been marked as Maharashtra. The business place or the company's business place is being marked as Maharashtra. So it should be ideally the entry should have CGST, SGST and not IGST. And so these entries are reflecting in this list. The moment if I change it to CGST, SGST, this will automatically get removed. I will do it one for you right now. CGST output at the rate 9, and it's 9. I'll add a row over here is GST output at the rate 9%. 9, save the GST breakup, save. So now logically this entry should get removed from the screen. So if I click on search, the data is gone. That means you have corrected the transactions correctly. Now the opposite parts comes in as expected interstate GST. It's just the opposite of what I showed it to you right now. Over here, the party which is being selected over here, the party state is West Bengal, and the company or in the business place in which we did the transaction is pertaining of Maharashtra. So ideally, it's an interstate transaction, but forcefully I asked my system to update it under CGST and SGST. So it warned me and allowed me to save, but ideally it's a wrong transaction. So we are supposed to correct these kind of entries where it is expected to be IGST, but by mistake or for some reason at that moment we updated it as CGST, SGST. So if you correct the data will get removed from these transactions. So these GST exception data will always help you in your reconciliation purpose or at the time of filing of GSTR1, so that you need not miss out any transactions or you need not file the incorrect data. So this is all about the GST exception report. I hope the reports helps you out in your GSTR1 filing. So it's a request to all of you. to refer this report in case if you are having any kind of mismatches or confusions coming up at the time of GSTR1 filing, so that it can help you out and in your reconciliation purpose. So moving ahead, I will go for our next topic of the day, which is the additional properties. I'll share the screen once again. Okay. So now what is all about the additional properties? Now, I in the beginning of the session, I talked about the properties. The 3 properties will be discussed today, which is the first one is voucher properties, ledger properties, and item properties. Now, what's the use case of these properties coming in? So these properties does not have any specific use case as of now. So it can happen that for one company, the use case is completely different. For the other company, it's completely different. So for example, I will go to master's accounts. We'll first discuss the voucher properties. We'll go to vouchers, and probably I'll go for the edit part. So it can be created at the time of voucher create as well. So I am opening the payment part. So, okay, I have the option of configuration and property template. Now, I am having 2 drop downs coming up in as optional and mandatory, and the property keys. Now, these are dynamic. You can make it as your company's requirement. For example, I want to have some certain kind of cash flow code. Now, what is cash flow code? This is an understanding that I want some in each and every payment transactions, whatever entries is updated in the payment voucher type, whatever property code. I mean, if my different property codes are there for each and every type of transactions, like my expense or electricity bills have certain cash flow code, my miscellaneous expenses have certain kind of cash flow codes. So those kind of codes can be tracked over here. And at the end of the month or the end of the quarter, if you want to review that this particular cash flow code or under this category, how many transactions has been updated, what is its amount. So all detailings you will get to know with the help of these cash flow code. Although you will be getting an help at the in reconciliation purpose with the transaction wise, but these kind of property keys can also be used at the time of customization of any template. So it's not any voucher nature specific, it is available for each and every voucher nature available in RealBooks. So over here, I'm making it the cash flow code. Now it's my wish whether I want the user to mandatorily update the cash flow code or I want it to be an optional part. So in case if I'm putting it as an optional part, at the time of submitting the transaction, it will not give me an alert that I am supposed to update the cash flow code or not. But if it is mandatory, my system will not allow you to save the transaction without feeding the property key of cash flow code, which I have updated over here. So I am updating it as mandatory and I'll hit submit. Now I'll quickly go to transactions, accounts, and voucher. So I will go to payment. I will quickly select one party as Zomato, 8,000. The bill is REF 987. Create. I'll put the cash. I'll put it as test. Voucher property. It wants me. The moment I hit submit, I'm getting a mandatory warning option as mandatory voucher properties value are required. So I'll hit OK. So the moment I hit OK, it will alert me that I'm supposed to update the property key, which I defined in my voucher master. It is a mandatory field to update the cash flow code at CC-008. So if I click on add, I hit submit, my voucher property in the transaction has been updated. So I'll update one more transactions for you, like ABC Private Limited, 7890, 5, and create. This time I'll put the bank transaction. It's SBI, sorry, State Bank of India. And I am putting it as check. and I'll hit add. I'll hit on submit. Oh, I am supposed to update the cash flow code. Okay, this time I'll give the cash flow code at CR0085. I'll hit add and submit. Okay, now the transactions are carrying the voucher properties over here, but where do I find the entries? But when I'm supposed to reconcile, I want to check that where all these voucher properties are getting saved. I need to go to reports, accounts, daily reports, and table. I'll select the voucher type as payment, and I will hit search. The two entries I updated over here, I am having an option of voucher properties coming up in my table. If I click over here and I download the Excel as Excel pivot details, I open the data, I will be finding the voucher properties over here. So it's dynamic. So the number of voucher property template you create, the columns get increased, and automatically all the values which is being getting saved in your transaction, it will reflect in your Excel. So this was all about the cash flow code. Similarly, it goes for the ledger report, ledger property, and the item property as well. So we skip to the ledger property part. Now there is an option in my masters under account section, which is ledger properties. Now let's see how does it works. We'll click on create. For example, I am selecting as sundry creditors, cash specific. So if I click it as mandatory part and click save, this is already saved. Now I'll have to move into masters, accounts, ledger, and create. So now I need to select as exotic. Right bit. Let's make it enterprise. And I will select sundry creditors. And I'll hit save. So it will want me for state. I'll make it as West Bengal. I'll hit save. Okay, now again, it's warning me since I marked the ledger property as mandatory, it wants me that please enter the ledger property for mandatory fields. If I click on OK, I need to go to the properties tab. This is the key that I created as for my understanding in my masters. You can create it the way you want it, and I am updating it as creditors ABC. So if I hit save, the transaction gets saved. Now, if I make any kind of transactions, for example, if I go for sale and I will make the ledger as sales and put the ledger as exotic enterprises. This is the ledger. Go down. Item. Put the quantity as 580. And I will hit go and submit. Cannot retrieve. Okay, I'm so sorry for that. Hit done and submit. Now the ledger property has got saved in the transactions or all the levels. Now how to view those? It should be accounts, daily reports, and bill status report. So while viewing the bill status summary report, you are having options with ledger properties or without ledger properties. How do you want to view the bill status report? So if you select it as enterprises, and if you want to select it, and then if you want to have the data, So this is something which was updated in my ledger property. So this ledger is not reflecting. Let's check why. So we'll go to accounts, ledger, and our ledger as exotic. This is the ledger. Okay, we did not activate the bill. So we are supposed to activate the bill so that the data can reflect in our bill status report. So I'll hit save now. And again, go back to reports, accounts, daily reports, and then status report. So in my bill status report, now if I search the ledger, now it's reflecting. So now if I click over here, I select the data as with ledger properties, it will reflect the data that I updated in the ledger master. So this way you can also extract the Excels with ledger properties or without ledger properties, and same goes with the bill sections as well, because again in your bill sections you will be finding these options. So as per your requirement of the books, you can update it for the ledger properties as well as you can have the voucher properties and ledger properties both all at once in these entries. So this can be used to customize your templates as well as viewing your bill status report as per your company's requirement. With this, we come to the end of the second property, which was ledger property. And now let's quickly get into the item property part. We'll go to masters, inventory, items, and then item properties. Now, this is an option that needs to be enabled from our settings configuration page, which goes like settings, configuration, inventory, item, and we are having item properties. So if this toggle button is enabled from your settings configuration page, then you will be having this option of masters, inventory, and item properties. Otherwise, you will not be able to view these options in the masters. Now let's get into the item properties part and get into the create part. Now there is an item group. You can always search it from here, or you can type it for the item group you're searching for and hit go. And it is the same. The keys, the dynamics, it's all exactly same, just like the voucher properties, the ledger properties, and the item properties. And it can be used as per the convenience or the requirement of that particular company. So over here, if I want to have two types of keys, for example, one is ABC, item property, and the other one is as XYZ, item property. Over here, I want the XYZ item property to be a mandatory field, and I do not want ABC item property to be a mandatory field. So this was an extra row that I have been adding over here. The same can be used for both voucher properties and ledger properties. Now I'll hit save. I'll click on OK. My data has been saved over here. I'll go to masters, inventory, items, and now I will create an item. I will create the item as codes, and the item group has been, the property has been updated against the item group as raw materials. I will select pieces. Now I will hit I will enable, I'll disable the batch over here, and I will hit save. So now if you want to view your item property over here, you can simply go to items, and over here, if you find the properties, you will be having ABC item property and XYZ property coming up into the scenario. So I will update it as 785, and I'll update it as 125, and I'll hit save. So again, so if this item is being used in your purchase, sale, purchase return, sale return, any kind of transactions, you can use these dynamic fields in your template, in customizing your template. So all these features will help you out in updating the customizing your templates, or probably in viewing the reports or the way you want it. I hope the session is helpful for all of you, and I will be looking forward for all of your feedbacks. In case of any query, please reach out to our support team. We'll just try our level best to help you out in the way we can. So thank you so much for joining, everyone. Thank you.